Every man who has wanted a woman badly enough has run into the same cruel riddle. You lean in, and she leans back. You double your effort, and her interest halves. You clear your whole evening for her, and suddenly she's busy for the next 2 weeks. You hand over your full attention, and she treats it like spare change. There you are, exhausted and a little humiliated, asking yourself how something as honest as wanting her could be the exact thing driving her off. None of it adds up. Not until the day you finally see that chasing and hunting are not two flavors of the same behavior. They are opposite acts, born of opposite minds, and they end in opposite places. Chasing turns you into a man begging in the costume of a suitor. Hunting turns you into something she no longer wants to outrun. Niccolò Machiavelli had this figured out long before your first heartbreak. He spent his life watching ambitious men sprint after the things they craved and lose them in the sprinting. Princes chasing alliances handed away their leverage. Generals chasing a quick win marched straight into the ambush. Politicians chasing the crowd's affection earned its contempt instead, because nothing reads as weakness faster than a man who needs to be liked. And then, every so often, Machiavelli noticed a different breed of man. Unhurried. Watchful. A man who never seemed to chase a single thing in his life, yet somehow collected everything the chasers were sweating for. Machiavelli took that man apart, studied his moves, and pressed the lessons into pages that still cut today. What follows is those lessons, translated into the architecture of attraction, so cleanly that by the end you won't just understand why chasing collapses. You'll understand precisely how the hunt is built, from the first glance to the moment she realizes she stopped wanting to leave. Part 1. Why chasing trips her. Alarms start with the wiring, because until you grasp what fires inside her when you chase, you'll keep chasing and keep losing. When a man pursues too hard, he broadcasts a bundle of signals that her nervous system reads in a particular and deeply unhelpful way. She isn't deciding any of this on purpose. It's handled by the same old threat-sorting machinery that kept her ancestors breathing, the one that judges in a heartbeat whether something coming toward you is safe, dangerous, or beneath notice. Chasing drops you into a bucket your charm can't talk you out of. Not a physical danger. An emotional one. The danger of a man who wants something so much he might trample a boundary to get it. The danger of being handed responsibility for someone else's feelings. The danger of a need so loud and so constant that soothing it could quietly become her second job. Her system doesn't audit your character. It doesn't weigh your good intentions. It clocks the pattern, the pile of unanswered texts, the instant replies, the emotional outpouring, and it slots you beside every other person who ever showed up with too much heat and too little control. Filed under, drain. And once you're filed there, her behavior reorganizes itself without her permission. Replies stretch out. The warmth cools. The open door narrows. She backs away, not from a conscious choice, but because something older than choice is steering her clear of what it reads as an energy loss, a man who takes more than he returns, whose company costs more than it pays. Machiavelli mapped this same machinery in the world of power. In his analysis of how rulers lose territory they've just won, he lands on something that should sting your dating life. The ruler who clamps down too hard on a fresh conquest doesn't secure it, he poisons it. The visible troops, the loud displays of control, the obvious hunger to dominate every corner, the people don't feel led, they feel occupied. And the occupied always plot their revolt. Your flood of texts is the garrison. Your perpetual availability is the flag jammed into ground you never earned. She isn't drifting toward love. She's quietly organizing her escape. Part 2. The hunter's patience as a weapon. A hunter never bolts toward what he wants. That's the root of everything. He closes the distance slowly, with precision and a calm that's almost unnerving. He reads the land before he sets foot in it. He learns how his quarry moves before he commits to a single step. He plants himself where the target will naturally drift, instead of burning himself out chasing it across open ground. And then he waits. Not limp, not helpless. He waits with the coiled, ready stillness of a man who knows timing decides the outcome, and that moving too early is worse than not moving at all. Timing was Machiavelli's obsession. It pulses under every chapter he wrote. The man who wins, he argued, is the one whose method fits the hour. Strike too soon and you spend your strength on nothing. Strike too late and the opening has already closed. The whole art is reading the moment so well that when you finally move, the move feels less like a decision and more like a foregone conclusion. Pour that into how you handle a woman and it rewrites the script you were raised on. The hunter doesn't fire off a message the instant her number lands in his phone, not as a trick, but because his attention is genuinely elsewhere, and a new number, however welcome, doesn't reshuffle his day. The hunter doesn't lunge for a date in the first hour. He lets a few exchanges sketch out his humor, his weight, his edges, and then he offers, not grasping, not apologizing, with the level confidence of a man extending something rather than asking for a favor. When the talk goes quiet, he leaves the quiet alone. He doesn't read silence as a verdict, he reads it as room. Room her mind will fill with thoughts of him, as long as he doesn't rush in and fill it with desperation first. Every one of these moves whispers the same thing, and it's a thing she almost never hears. This man has options, this man has a life, and his choosing to spend it here feels like a decision, not a plea. That deliberateness is his sharpest tool, because deliberate pursuit lands as selection. And being selected by a man who clearly doesn't have to select anyone is about as intoxicating as it gets. Machiavelli saw the identical truth in the alliances he studied. The prince who chose his partners carefully was prized by them, while the prince who begged for them was tossed aside. Same arrangement, different energy, opposite ending. She has no interest in being your only option. She wants to be your best one. The distance between only and best is the same distance between chasing and hunting. One screams scarcity, the other quietly states a standard, and standards pull in a way that scarcity never can. If this is already cracking something open in how you see attraction, do yourself a favor and subscribe. Everything that follows is built for the man who's done being the one who runs, the man who wants to actually understand female psychology instead of fumbling through it. Part 3. Reading the land before you step in. No hunter walks into strange country blind. He scouts. He observes. He learns the ground so well that by his first real step he already knows where the high ground sits, where the cover is, and where the openings will appear. Machiavelli spent more ink on reconnaissance than on any other piece of strategy, insisting again and again that the prince who truly knows the territory he's entering has won half the war before it starts, not by force, by knowing. Most men move on a woman blind. They feel the pull and they charge, instantly, without spending 1 second on who she actually is, what moves her, what she's performing versus what she's hiding. The hunter watches first. Not in a way that crawls, in a way that perceives. At the party, the cafe, the group table, wherever the first encounter lives, he notices what the eager man, too busy broadcasting, sails right past. He catches how her energy shifts between people, open and lit up with some, courteous but sealed with others, a tell about who she trusts and what kind of presence she leans toward. He catches what genuinely makes her laugh, not the polite one she hands everyone, but the real one that ambushes her, the one she muffles with her hand because it came out louder than she meant. Whatever pulled that laugh out tells him more than an hour of small talk. He catches her body when she thinks no one's reading it, how she holds her glass, where her eyes drift in the lulls, whether she tilts in or holds her ground, whether her fingers stray toe her hair or her collarbone. Each tiny motion is a line in a language most men never bother to learn. So by the time he approaches, he already knows something she hasn't said, and that knowledge shapes an opening so specific, so unlike the recycled lines she's fielded all night, that it slips past her guard as if the guard weren't there. Not because he said anything clever, because he said something true, something that told her in 10 seconds flat that this man was actually paying attention. Machiavelli called this grasping the temper of the people. Every population has its moods and its unmet needs, and the ruler who reads them governs well while the one who ignores them governs briefly. She has her temper too, emotional frequencies that light her up and ones that bore her hollow. Read them. Then speak to them, not with flattery, but with the plain insight of a man who looked before he leapt and liked what he found. Part 4. Pulling her onto your ground. Here Machiavelli's battlefield logic gets literal. He wrote at length about the edge of fighting on home terrain. A prince who fights on foreign soil stretches his supply lines thin, drains his men, and operates where every variable favors the enemy. A prince who lures the enemy onto his own ground commands all of it, the land, the clock, the resources, the angle of the clash. Chasing a woman is fighting on foreign soil. You're moving through her world, on her calendar, around her tastes, inside her emotional weather, bending yourself to fit whatever sliver of space she'll allow. Hunting reverses the field. You build a life, an energy, an identity so magnetic that she crosses over to you, not because you dragged her, but because the gravity of your world simply outweighs everyone else's. In practice that looks like things most men never consider. Instead of marching to the restaurant she named, you take her somewhere that means something to you, a place that shows who you are, where you're easy and sure of yourself. Instead of reshaping your rhythm to mirror hers, you keep your own. You answer when you answer, you reach out when you reach out, at the pace of a man with a full life rather than an empty phone, and she calibrates to you, because your rhythm carries something hers can't, steadiness, a fixed center, a man living by his own clock instead of performing spontaneity. Instead of asking what she'd like to do, you decide, not coldly, not bossily, but with the quiet authority of a man who already thought it through. I'm heading to this spot Saturday. You should come. Not where do you want to go, not whatever works for you. Invitation, not negotiation. That sentence is the grammar of a hunter. It says my life is already in motion, with or without you, and I'm offering you a seat at my table rather than pleading for one at yours. Machiavelli would call this the move of the prince who makes his realm so prosperous and well-run that rival states come seeking alliance instead of needing to be wooed. The prince doesn't chase allies, he builds something worth allying with, and they arrive on their own. Build your realm, your body, your mind, your circle, your money, your work, your composure, until it hums with the charge of a life lived at full output. Then let her step into that life on your terms, not because you're controlling, but because a life this full has a natural shape, and honoring that shape is simply the cost of entry. She won't resent the structure. She'll be relieved by it, because structure means stability, And stability is the thing women hunger for far more than romance, more than passion, more than any storybook they were handed as girls. Part 5. The approach. Controlled heat. The hunter's approach looks nothing like the chaser's. The chaser arrives hot and obvious, his hunger walks in ahead of his words. He's leaning in before he's spoken, his eyes greedy before they're curious, every signal screaming I want something from you and none of them whispering I have something to offer. The hunter approaches with controlled heat, a warmth that's also restrained, present but unhurried, interested but unattached. It's the energy of a man who noticed something worth a closer look and is investigating it out of real curiosity rather than a verdict he reached before he opened his mouth. Machiavelli described this same balance in diplomacy. The envoy at a foreign court should seem interested but never eager, engaged but never hostage to the result, respectful of the other side's power without shrinking beneath it. Interest without need, engagement without dependence, respect without submission, that was his foundation for diplomacy, and it's the foundation of a strong approach too. When the hunter speaks, his questions are real, not the biographical interrogation that passes for dating now, but questions born of actual curiosity about who she is beneath the surface, questions that prove he's chewing on what she says instead of loading his next line. When he listens, he actually listens, not the fake nodding that waits for an opening to swing the spotlight back to himself, but the kind where something she says snags on something he's thought about, and he folds that thread into the conversation so she feels not just heard but understood. And when he decides he's interested, he says so without flooding. A clean statement. I'd like to see you again. Not maybe we could hang out sometime if you're around. Not the verbal tiptoe where every word is chosen to soften the blow of a no. Clear, direct, bearing just enough to show courage without tipping into pressure. Then he steps back. He doesn't lean on her for an instant answer. He doesn't rush to bury the statement under qualifiers and backup plans. He says it, lets it hang in the air, and trusts her to answer in her own time. That trust, the nerve to let silence sit after a declaration, is one of the most attractive things a man can show, because it signals what she almost never meets, a man at peace with not knowing, a man whose worth doesn't dangle from her next sentence. Machiavelli held that the prince who can sit in uncertainty without panic outlasts the rest, because uncertainty is the natural weather of the world, and the man who needs guarantees to function will be thrown by reality forever. Make your move, then breathe. The outcome was never your job. The execution was, and clean execution lets the outcome handle itself. Part 6. Pursuing without sliding back into chasing. This is where men slip. They get the hunter's mind in theory, then collapse into chasing the second they start to pursue, because from the inside the two feel almost identical. Both move forward. Both take effort. Both involve wanting someone and acting on it. The difference is internal, and that internal difference rewrites everything on the outside. Chasing is motion powered by fear, fear of losing her, fear of the window slamming shut, fear that if you don't move now and hard and often she'll vanish. It has a frantic edge, an urgency that comes not from passion but from panic, and panic, however well you dress it up, bleeds through every message and every gesture. Pursuit is motion powered by desire, clean, grounded, unhurried desire. The desire of a man who sees what he wants and moves toward it at his own pace, on his own terms, knowing the wanting itself is good regardless of how it lands. Machiavelli split these two engines across all his work. Princes who acted from fear made disasters. They clung to failing plans because changing course frightened them. They gave away ground they didn't need to surrender. They moved too fast because patience scared them. Princes who acted from desire, from a vision of what they were building rather than a flinch at what they might lose, chose better at every turn. Their timing was sharper because panic wasn't rushing them. Their strategy was cleaner because desperation wasn't bending it. Their execution was steadier because they worked from a settled center instead of a spinning edge. Your pursuit should carry that same weight, a man moving towards something he wants, not fleeing something he fears. In practice, it's a steady but unhurried rhythm. You reach out when you actually have something to say, not on a schedule built to keep the thread alive, not to plug a silence that makes you twitch. You escalate when escalation feels natural, not because a timeline in your head says it's overdue, not because some podcast told you to make physical contact by a certain hour, but when the charge between you has genuinely climbed to the point where the next step is obvious, and you take it calmly, without the trembling urgency of a man who's been rehearsing it for 3 sleepless days. And you meet her responses, whatever they are, with an even keel. Warmth? You enjoy it without clutching. Coolness? You note the temperature without spiraling. A pullback? You let the space exist instead of scrambling to fill it. That evenness isn't indifference. It's the quiet certainty of a man whose value doesn't swing on her reply, the same man whether she answers in 30 seconds or 30 hours, whether the night soars or stalls, whether she says yes or no. That consistency is exactly what turns pursuit into hunting, because a hunter's identity isn't chained to whether this one hunt lands. He knows other ground exists, his skill travels, and his worth was never riding on a single outcome. That energy is impossible to fake, and it's the one thing she's been searching for under every man who came before you. If you've made it this far, you already feel the shift this is pointing at. Subscribe and stay close. This channel exists to hand men the patience, the perception, and the self-command that make all of this second nature. If you want to stop running and start owning the way you move, this is where you learn it. Part 7. The Strike. Knowing when to commit. Machiavelli held that the prince must know the exact hour to strike, not early, not late, but the precise moment when conditions line up and decisiveness buys the most ground for the least resistance. In the psychology of desire, there's a twin to that moment, when she crosses from curiosity into investment, when she stops evaluating you and starts wanting you, when the current flips from your pursuit of her into something far stronger, mutual gravity. You'll feel it arrive. Not because she announces it, but because the texture of everything changes. Her replies aren't just warm, they're eager. She isn't just accepting your invitations, she's manufacturing chances for you to make them. She isn't just laughing at your humor, she's bringing her own. She isn't leaning back. She's leaning in, not only with her body, but with her whole self. This is the moment the hunter has been circling. And it's the moment where most men, even ones who did everything right until now, blow it. They hesitate. After all that patience, all that restraint, after weeks of measured pursuit, they reach the point of commitment and freeze, because the very patience that carried them now turns on them. They train themselves to hold back, and now the moment demands the opposite. Machiavelli would have no mercy here. There are hours when caution serves the prince and hours when only boldness will do, and the man who can't switch between them, cautious when boldness is called for, or reckless when caution is, gets destroyed by his own rigidity. When the moment lands, commit fully, without the careful restraint that governed everything before it. Tell her what you feel, not in a flood but in a declaration, clear, direct, unmistakable, carrying the same controlled heat that defined your approach, now charged with raw, undeniable want. Not "I think I might be catching feelings." Not I don't really know where this is going, but I like you. Something that leaves no crack for reinterpretation, that plants a claim without apologizing for it, that says, I've been patient, I've been deliberate, I've watched and waited, and now I know you're what I want and I'm not the least bit unsure. That flip, from patient restraint to decisive commitment, is the most electrifying thing a woman can feel from a man, because she watched the restraint, she felt the controlled power behind it, and she knows on instinct that a man with this much discipline isn't acting on impulse. He's acting in conviction. And conviction, unleashed after long containment, hits with a force no premature confession could ever match. The chaser hands over his devotion on day one, where it lands unwanted and unearned, like a gift nobody asked for. The hunter offers his at the precise moment it will sink deepest, after she's invested, after she's wondered, after she's lain awake at 2 a.m. trying to read his mind, after her own desire has climbed to where his commitment doesn't just satisfy her, it releases her. That release, the exhale of a woman who finally knows she's been chosen by a man whose choosing actually means something, is the payoff for every minute of patience that led there. The code let it all distill into a code, not rules, a code, something you carry inside that runs every interaction without being summoned. First, never move from need. Every action toward her should come from desire, not desperation. If you can't tell which it is in the moment, don't act, because need contracts and desire expands, need clenches and desire opens. Second, study before you engage. Observe, listen, read her energy and her patterns before you spend a single resource, because intelligence gathered before contact is worth more than effort burned after it. Third, invite, never beg. Make your life the destination and let your invitations be offerings. Come into my world will always outpull, please let me into yours. Fourth, tolerate uncertainty. Her silence isn't rejection, her distance isn't dismissal, and the man who can sit calmly in the unresolved outlasts every rival. Fifth, strike when the iron glows. Patience is a virtue right up until it curdles into cowardice. When the moment demands action, act fully and boldly, and knowing the line between patience and procrastination is the hunter's most vital skill. Sixth, keep your world running no matter the outcome. Yes, no, or nothing at all, your life moves at full speed, your mission holds, your discipline doesn't pause for any woman, because a man who freezes his life for a woman has just told her his life wasn't worth living without her, and that confession is the death of desire. Machiavelli watched men chase their own ruin across the courts and battlefields of Renaissance Italy, clever men making stupid choices because wanting clouded their judgment, powerful men signing away their power because visible hunger turned them into beggars and crowns. From all of it he pulled one law that governs every corner of human life: the man who chases hands his power to the thing he's chasing, and the man who hunts keeps his power in his own grip. You've been chasing, maybe for years, maybe your whole adult life, sprinting after women who only retreated faster, baffled that your devotion repelled instead of pulled, blaming yourself, them, the universe, for a game that felt rigged. It was never rigged. You were playing it wrong. So stop chasing. Start hunting. Build a life so magnetic that pursuit becomes unnecessary. Grow patience deep enough that her timeline can't shake yours. Sharpen your perception until you read who she really is before she shows you. And when the moment comes, when the alignment is right and the timing is perfect and every instinct says now, strike with the full weight of a man who earned this through discipline rather than stumbled into it through desperation. That man doesn't chase. He doesn't need to, because the patient, perceptive, self-possessed energy he carries creates a pull no woman resists and no chaser can imitate. Be the hunter, not because it's the smarter tactic, but because it's the better way to live. A life built on patience, perception, and self-command isn't only more attractive, it's more grounded, more meaningful, more alive. And a man who is fully alive never has to chase anything. Life chases him. If this rewired something in you, subscribe and share it with the man still running and still wondering why she keeps drifting further away. This might be the moment he finally stops, catches his breath, and learns to hunt instead. Machiavelli would approve.